right, so thank you everyone for participating in this class. I'm just going to start a screen share and then we'll get going. Can everyone see it? Okay, great. So today we're going to talk about compounds, the Sanskrit term just being samasaha. Does anybody know, sort of like very literally, what that term means or what root, what dhatu it comes from? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So it's from a root us, which means to throw. So asyati, not us as in asti to be, but rather us to throw. And so we would say like to compound, to pound together, but they would say to throw together to refer to compounds. And so the reason I chose this slide was that the root us is also used for, we would say shoot arrows, they would say throw arrows. So this is actually from the Mahabharata. It's Shikhandi and Krupa, throwing or compounding arrows. So the first type of compound we're going to talk about is the Dvandva. Does anybody, what does a Dvandva mean?
Like a pair.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Sometimes you'll see it translated as like copulative compound. In Goldman, for example, the Goldmans, this would be page 241, but very literally it just means a pair. And here are these two croucha birds. Does anybody remember that from the Ramayana? Okay, so what were the croucha birds? What happened there?
So they were mating and then they were shot. Like a king was hunting and he shot them. So and they were mating. So then Valmiki comes around and then he says that you have like separated a pair in love and when they were sharing an intimate moment. So that's like then you will be also cursed with a similar like sorrow and all. And that also started it was the inspiration for the Ramayana as well.
Exactly. It's that moment where from his grief, his shoka, came the first verse, shloka. Yeah, exactly. So there's two basic types. Goldman doesn't get into it. Deshpande in lesson 32 does start talking about it. And the basic division, there's this one type, the itaretara dvandva and the samahara dvandva. Does anybody know, if we take the term itaretara, how does that break up with the sandhi? And what does that mean?
Would it be like itara and itara?
Exactly right. That's exactly. And what is itara and itara?
Does it mean other?
Exactly right. Oops. It's itara and itara. And so in Sanskrit, they would say the other, where in English we would be like the one and the other. And the feature about this category or type, which is referred to as the cumulative dvandva, sort of you add up the component pieces, is that it's inflected as per the number of the total. So if there are two noun stems, it would be in the dual. If there's three or more, it would be in the plural. And it takes the grammatical gender of the final noun stem, regardless of the gender of the previous noun stems. So for example, Yudhishthira Bhimarjunaha, probably familiar characters. Here you have the three Pandava brothers from descending from eldest downwards, Yudhishthira and Bhima and Arjuna, and it's in the plural, the nominative plural, and it's inflected in the masculine because Arjuna is in the masculine. So In contrast, we have then the samahara dvandva. Does anybody know what does samahara mean?
Does it mean together or not?
Yeah, that's right. It means something like maybe like a group or an aggregate. So it's referred to as the aggregative dvandva. And in contrast to the iteretara dvandva, it's always inflected in the singular, regardless of how many members there are making it up, and regardless of the actual gender of the constituent members, it's always in the neuter. So, for example, pani padam. Pani is like a hand, and pada is a foot. And this means hands and feet. And so pada is in the masculine, but it's still inflected in the neuter. And it's singular despite the fact of there being 4 things total, 2 hands and 2 feet. Or maybe more if it's like Shiva or something. But so moving on, with compounds, we gloss compounds using something called a vigraha. Does anybody know what does vigraha literally mean? Like, what is the root and what does like V mean?
Is it from grah to like grasp?
Exactly. And what does V mean?
It's either an intensifier or the opposite.
Kind of right, kind of right. It's sort of like apart. So literally it's to grasp apart, to kind of break apart, which is why I'm just translating it as analysis, to kind of like dissect it. And what a vigraha is to gloss a compound and sort of unambiguously give its meaning in natural prose language. So in the case of the dvandva, we would add the term cha, just and, after each and every constituent member making up the dvandva to show their coordination. So to take the same example, Yudhishthira Bhimarjunaha, we would gloss it using cha. Yudhishthira Bhimashksharjuna Ksheti Yudhishthira Bhimarjunaha. And this is just one way of glossing it. There's a range of stylistic variation within the parameters of what's acceptable, and there are things that could be wrong. But if we're reading the actual literature, imagine we're reading a literary commentary. This word iti here, it sort of means thus, or almost like therefore. So you coordinate the members, Yudhishthira and Bhima and Arjuna, thus, and then you sort of repeat the compound. But in the actual literature, you might not, well, more often than not, a literary commentator would not repeat it, and they might not necessarily use, they probably wouldn't use this many ands. They might just use one, which would still signal what they're doing and how they're interpreting the compound. But it wouldn't be as, it's not to say this is heavy-handed, but the sort of style of gloss we're doing has a pedagogical thrust to it. And so one thing I want to ask is, does anybody know what specific feature is our gloss using these ands pointing to? If you don't have the answer, it's okay. But any ideas?
Maybe the connection between the items in the compound?
Exactly. Yes, exactly right. It's the, yes. So it demonstrates sort of the coordination, as you put it, the connection, and specifically in the form of their sort of equal predominance, meaning all of the constituent members participate equally in the larger syntax. And I'll just give an example. And hopefully this will clarify what I'm getting at. So let's take the example of Raja Purusha. So Raja, just from the stem Rajan, meaning king, and Purusha, just meaning man. And we're going to look at this compound both as a Dvandva and as a Tat Purusha. And everybody knows what a Tat Purusha is, so I won't explain that. But consider this compound as a Dvandva. If I were to gloss it as Rajacha, Purusha Cheti Raja Purushao, meaning the king and his man. Notice that it's inflected in the dual and in the masculine, so it's an iteredhara dvandva. And if I were to make a sentence using this, the king and his man go to the forest, Raja Purushao, Vanam Gachataha. The compound is inflected in the dual, as is the verb. Both the king and his man are equally participating in the event of going. And so when we do this gloss or analysis, this vigraha, using these chas, it shows that structurally, syntactically, both items are in the same structural place. Now let's contrast that with the same compound Raja Purusha, not as a dvandva, but as a tat Purusha, which here I would be glossing as Rajnyaf Purusha, iti Raja Purushaha, which means the king's man, or the man of the king. And here, the king is a qualifier of Purushaha. They're not coordinated or connected on equal footing. And so, if I were to say Raja Purushaha goes to the forest, meaning Raja Purusha as a Tat Purusha, notice the inflection here. Nominative singular, not nominative dual. So the king's man goes gachati to the forest. The king may or may not also be going to the forest, but that's not encoded in the language. And our glosses capture these facts. So the gloss here using the genitive affords and allows it so that only the Purusha, which is at a higher structural level in the syntax, participates in the event of going. Whereas using these chus in our gloss show that they're both on equal footing and they both participate in the event of going. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So next, I have a question. Whoops, let me just click. So how would we do a vigraha for the dvandva panipadam, hands and feet, in the sentence mama panipadam shitam, my hands and feet are cold? And think about the context here a little. There's a point to be made. How would we do this sort of gloss here, where we add the chus, add the iti, and then repeat the whole term? Would somebody like to try? Anybody really?
I'll take a go. I'm not sure though.
Oh no worries, no pressure.
Will I just say pani cha padam? But the whole problem is it's the singular. Pani padam seems like the ending seems in the singular. So I don't, that's what, if it was a regular, like Dvandva in the previous case, it should be pani padau, but here it's pani padam.
Good question. Okay, so I see what you're talking about. So let me go back. Well, that's going the wrong way. You saw the answer. 1 second. Sorry, my screen is lagging. But so what I would say is that regardless of what it comes out as when we restate the whole compound, everything before the et, we put it as it would be in the factual state of affairs. So here, for example, there is one Yudhishthira, and so Yudhishthiraha, not Yudhishthirao, not Yudhishthiraha, not in the dual, not in the plural. And then we add a cha, one bhima, add a cha, bhima in the singular. And so the fact of this being an iteretara dvandva is, we'll see further criteria in a minute for why certain things should be samahara dvandvas and why certain things should be iteretara dvandvas. But for now, let's simply just take as a fact that this is a samahara dvandva, but that in the analysis, what comes before the et should reflect the factual state of affairs. So how would, yeah, just give it a go. Give it a go.
Pani cha padaha cha iti pani padam.
Good, very close. And so why shouldn't it be panihi in the context of my hands and feet are cold?
Oh, I thought I actually was getting the short e stem wrong. Oh, panim. Okay.
Exactly. So here, pani, this is the nominative dual of panihi, the masculine stem, and then padao. So the point being, that I'm trying to make clear is that in the gloss, what comes before the et, in the context, my hands and feet are cold, you would want to analyzing it, putting it in two. Like I was saying before, maybe it's Shiva and there are like multiple hands, but here it would just go in the dual. 2 hands, 2 feet. Does that make sense? Cool, awesome. So let's keep going. Sorry, my screen is lagging a little bit. I think I froze. Here we go, good. So moving on to talk about the samahara dvandva, it can imply an aggregate or a complex idea above and beyond the constituent members. Typically, people think that bahuvrihis do something like this, but dvandvas can kind of do something like this too. So consider ahara nidra bhayam, which means food, sleep, and fear when we look at the morphemes, the noun stems. And if you had to guess, what aggregate might there be above and beyond these members? I see some faces looking like you're sort of thinking about it. Just say something. It really doesn't matter too much.
Could it be like these 3 is a stock list of something?
Exactly. I'm just, if you had to guess as to what that something is.
Basic human condition of existence, maybe?
Very good. Very close. Animal life. But that's exactly right. So if you ever see like, maybe somebody's like a fan of like Real Madrid or something, and you see a shirt that says like eat, sleep, Real Madrid, or maybe they like going to the gym and then it's like eat, sleep, lift kind of thing. It's kind of like that. Like, what is animal life? You eat, you sleep, and you fear for your life. So moving on, so the iteretara, the cumulative variety, there's really no restrictions on what types of nominal reference can be used to make this formation. But that's not the case with the samahara dvandva, where it's neuter singular. There's just a staggering amount of restrictions. And moreover, if something can be a samahara dvandva, it must be a samahara dvandva, which, so we'll just see some categories which are representative but not exhaustive of the samahara dvandva. So, like we've already seen, parts of the body forming natural sets. Like we already saw this example, hands and feet, but also players of musical instruments. So for example, a mardangika is a player of the mridanga. It's a type of drum. And the parnavika is a player of the parnava. Could somebody try doing an analysis of this, just following the same structure here for hands and feet?
Sorry, do you mean to put these two words together in a dvandva, or?
Yeah, exactly. So just doing a vigraha, doing a gloss of it. So putting it together where the final outcome is a samahara type in the neuter singular, but just sort of stating it where you state each item separately, coordinate them with the kshas, add the iti, and then repeat the whole thing.
So will it be mardaga ja panavika iti mardaga panavika?
Very good, very good. Yes, we would add the kshas just after each item, and then in the end here, it would still be neuter singular, just based upon this players of musical instruments being sort of one stipulative category of things that fall under the category of these aggregative dvandvas. And so another type of things are parts of an army. So you might encounter this in like the Mahabharata or something. So for example, ratikaha, a rata is a chariot, and ashva is like a horse, ashvaroha, a guy who has ascended on a horseman or something. Would somebody else like to try doing this one?
Yeah. Would it be Rath Ashwaroha?
Exactly. The outcome of it would be Ratikashvaroham. That's right. But could you put it all together, just repeating this same formula?
Ratika cha Ashwaroha cha iti Rathika Ashwaroha.
Exactly. Very good. Exactly. Exactly right. Ratikahacha. One can do or not do the sandhi. For these purposes, it doesn't make a difference. Yeah. Another thing, bugs. So liksha, lice, and makshika. Does anybody know what a makshika? You can almost hear it in English. I think the English term got borrowed from some Indian vernacular.
Is it a mosquito?
Yep. Would somebody like to try this one?
Lakshaha cha makshikaha cha lakshamakshikam.
Perfect. Exactly right. Exactly. You added the kshas, put them both in plural, and regardless of the fact of the reference themselves being in plural, it's a samahara dvandva, and so it goes in the neuter singular. Exactly. It gets a little more niche-y. So names of rivers differing in gender, such as like the Ganga, feminine, and the Shonaha, masculine, would in fact form a samahara dvandva, but if the rivers are in the same gender, it doesn't form a samahara dvandva, which is kind of very specific. If you see here, Ganga Yamune, this is the feminine dual. So yeah, and also an interesting category, animals that are natural enemies. And I'm pretty sure Deshpande gives this example. Ahi and Nakula. If anybody had to guess, what are those two things? maybe if I said like sarpa instead of ahi.
I think ahi is a snake and nakula is some kind of bird. Like a
Close, very close. You're right. Ahi is snake and nakula is a mongoose.
oh,
Yeah, so it follows the exact same pattern. Ahi nakulam. And unfortunately, there are some things that are purely stipulative, meaning they don't fall in any category, but they still end up as samahara dvandvas. So like dasi dasam, female servants, male servants, putra pautram, sons and grandsons. And so, just in case anyone was curious, this is the Shona. It's a tributary of the Ganga, and the Ganga is up here and goes all the way down through here. This is kind of Mahabharata land up here. So Hastinapura is up here on the Ganga, and Indraprastha is on the Yamuna. So there are also rules governing the order of terms within the Dvandva, which just adds to the complexity a little bit. But so, for example, the names of brothers go from the eldest to the youngest. So this probably, I jumbled up the order, but does anybody know what order the Pandavas should go in to make this compound?
Yeah. It should be Yudhishthir, Arjun, then Nakul and Sahdev.
Close. What about close? What about Bhima?
Oh, sorry, I mean,
No.
yeah, Yudhishthir, Bhim, Arjun, Nakul, Sahdev.
That's right, exactly. Nakula, which also is a term for mongoose, and Sahadeva were the twins. They
Yes.
were born on the same day, but Nakula is elder. And I think Bhima was born on the same day as Duryodhana, the sort of eldest of the Kauravas. But yeah, so the Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadevaha. And then another one is the names of the castes go from highest to lowest. So also out of order, could somebody put these together in the correct order for this type of compound?
is it Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra?
Exactly right. Exactly. It would just go in the exact opposite order. And so last thing we're going to do, we're just going to do a little practice and try out some dvandvas. So could somebody make a dvandva with these two terms? Sort of, you can do the vigraha analysis if you want. You could just do the final outcome if you want, but pay attention to what type it should be based on what we saw through the lesson. This is just sort of to recap the lesson. Should it be a samahara, neuter singular? Should it be iteretara, sort of cumulative?
So I think this one is a Samahara Dvandva because like two parts of an army. So Sainika Gajaroham.
Perfect, very good. Exactly right. Exactly. It's a samahara dvandva because it's parts of an army. Could somebody, this one, maybe join it together, but also if you happen to know who are Kunti and Madri, it's a Mahabharata thing.
I think they're wives of Pandu.
Exactly. And so
I think it should be an iteretara then.
exactly, very good.
And it's Kunti Madrim.
Close. That would be the accusative singular.
Kunti Madri.
Madriao. Very good. There's a lot of grammatical forms. I do not expect you to remember it all. Just the fact that you're understanding that this should be an iteretara dvandva is exactly what we're trying to get out of this. That's exactly right. And so could somebody then try with this one, kukura, dog, and bidala, cat? What type should that be?
Is that a itera dvandva?
It's not, but let me ask you, why not? What are cats and dogs?
They're animals that are mutual enemies, so that's why they're samahara.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. If you want union, do you want to just put them together as a samahara dvandva?
So is that kukura be is that being being a lam?
Exactly, the it's bidalam, but no big deal. That's not the point. Yeah. Exactly. Kukura bidalam. And could somebody add together Lakshmana and Rama to make a compound? And what type should it be? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry.
No.
Rama Lakshmana.
Exactly. And so
It's
why
iterator.
exactly? It's an iterator. Why did you not say Lakshmana Rama? You did it correctly. I just want everybody to get the point.
Yeah, because of Ram is the elder brother, so we'll start with Ram.
Exactly. Very good. And here's a last one that I don't want to ask anybody it because I don't think it's predictable. It's just to show that all rules have exceptions. So these typically, when you just have people, it should become an iterator dvandva. These two words, for whatever reason, stipulatively, become a samahara dvandva, and typically the higher caste should come first, the arya, the noble guy, as opposed to the shudra. But for whatever reason, we get shudraryam, which is the opposite of what we would predict. So that's it for practice for these. Just in ending, what I would say is the rules we explored were exemplary, not exhaustive. So we went well beyond what the textbook does, but we didn't sort of exhaust every rule, but that's okay. I think as long as we have a sense of what's going on in the literature in a representative way, we're in a good place. And if anybody is interested to sort of look through every rule, and I wouldn't recommend memorizing every rule, I don't think it's really useful, but you can see M.R. Kale's A Higher Sanskrit Grammar, page 115 to 121, which I've put on Canvas. And so thank you. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Let me just stop recording and stop the screen share. Uh-oh, stop recording.